Routing groups. When we first looked at administrative groups, we mentioned that administrative groups don't have to be directly tied to the layout of your physical network. Routing groups, on the other hand, are directly related to your physical network. Routing groups are much like Active Directory sites, which are used to group servers via fast, reliable connections. Routing groups are used when you have multiple physical locations connected via WAN links. In our earlier example, when we made two administrative groups, one for New York and the other for London, we'd need some method of connecting them. So if we assume for a moment that we had an ISDN connection between these two sites, what we'd have to create is two routing groups, one at each site. Then each routing group would contain its own local servers. Then a connector would be configured to allow these two sites to communicate with each other, and this would be either the routing connector, which is the preferred option, as it can be used to connect one or more bridgehead servers and provide load balancing of messaging traffic. It could also be SMTP or the X400 connector. Now within routing groups where the network speed is usually high, such as on the same local area network, all Exchange servers transfer messages immediately. In contrast, when transfer needs to occur between two routing groups over a slower link, then one server in each routing group is designated as a bridgehead server, and all communication between routing groups is sent via this server. Now when we first installed Exchange 2003, a default routing group was created. And if you recall in our administrative groups video, you won't actually see this unless you've gone up to your Exchange organization, right-clicked, selected properties, and then opted to display routing groups. So if you haven't done that yet, do it now, and then you'll have to close the Exchange System Manager and then reopen it. And if you have done that, when you expand administrative groups, and then your first administrative group, which in our case is obviously New York, and then you can see here we have a routing groups option, so we'll expand that, and here we can see our first routing group, which is our default routing group. So we'll right click on this group and we'll rename it to something a little more useful, and we'll just simply call this one New York as well to make it very easy to identify. Alright, now we don't actually have anything in our London administrative group yet, as you can see, but what we'll do is we'll go ahead and create our routing group now anyway. So we'll right click and we'll select New, Routing Groups Container. And this just simply creates a container or a folder, if you like, underneath our London administrative group. So what we'll now do is we'll right click on our routing groups and we'll select New, Routing Group. And then we'll have to provide a name, so being in line with our previous one, we'll choose the name of London and click OK. And now if we expand our routing groups, we can see that we do have a routing group called London. Now before we move on, I should point out that you can only have one routing group container inside an administrative group, but you can have multiple routing groups inside your routing group container. Okay, so if we expand our London routing group, you can see that we've got two folders. We've got connectors and members. Now inside connectors, this is where we'll have our connectors for things like Lotus Notes or Novell or a calendar connector. And we'll go through those later in this course. And in the members folder, we'll see any servers that are members of this routing group. Now as this is a new routing group, we won't expect to see anything inside this container. But in contrast, if we expand our New York routing group and go to our members folder, we can see Server 01 is listed there, which was our default Exchange server. Okay, that's routing groups. They're extremely easy to create, and we'll see more about these when we get further into this series of videos. But for now, we'll move on and then we'll discuss policies.